An Apache woman knocked on his door at midnight. What came behind her froze him to the spot. The night was unusually still. The wind barely rustled the dry leaves scattered across the dirt path that led to the small house on the edge of the town. Inside, Thomas sat in his chair, staring at the flickering light of the lantern. His home was quiet, perhaps too quiet, as though the world itself was holding its breath. He had lived here for many years, far from the bustling town center, enjoying the peace and isolation that came with the distance. Yet tonight, that peace felt fragile, like a thin glass that could shatter with the slightest touch. Thomas had always been a man of routine. Every night he would sit by the lantern, sip his tea, and read a few pages from an old book he had found at a dusty bookstore long ago. But tonight, the usual comfort of the ritual did not reach him. His mind wandered to memories he had tried to bury. Memories of strange events from his youth, tales he had heard about the lands beyond the town, and whispers of the Apache traditions that seemed far away yet close enough to feel real in his dreams. A sudden knock at the door broke the silence. It was soft, deliberate, yet firm. Thomas froze mid-breath, staring at the wooden door as though it could suddenly reveal a hidden danger. Who could be knocking at this hour? Visitors were rare in his part of town, and at midnight they were practically unheard of. His first instinct was to ignore it, to pretend he had not heard anything, and hope the visitor went away. But the knock came again, a little louder this time, almost impatient. He rose slowly from his chair, his feet pressing lightly against the worn wooden floor. Every creak of the floorboard sounded loud in the stillness, and he felt a strange mixture of curiosity and unease. With trembling hands, he moved toward the door and peered through the small window. Outside, standing under the silver glow of the moon, was a woman he had never seen before. Her presence seemed to command attention. She wore clothes unlike anything he recognized, traditional Apache attire, intricate and colorful, flowing in the night breeze. Her dark hair fell loosely around her shoulders, and her eyes shone with a light that was both calm and urgent. For a moment, Thomas wondered if he was dreaming. The night, the wind, even the shadows seemed to conspire to make this moment feel unreal. The woman raised her hand slightly, a gesture that seemed to ask for trust and yet warned him to stay cautious. She spoke softly, her voice carrying in the cold night air. "Please," she said, "I need your help." Thomas hesitated. His mind raced with questions. Why would an Apache woman come here at midnight? What kind of help could she need? And what danger was she bringing with her? Still, something in her eyes made him believe her words. Something in the way she looked at him, with a mix of fear and determination, made him feel that ignoring her would be a mistake. He opened the door slowly, keeping a hand near the handle as though ready to retreat if necessary. "What is it?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though it sounded louder than he intended in the quiet night. The woman stepped closer, and as she did, Thomas noticed something strange behind her. At first it was just a shadow, a dark blur that seemed to move against the natural order of the night. Then he saw it more clearly, a figure, tall and silent, following her movements. It did not look human. Its shape was vague, as though it was part of the darkness itself, yet there was something in the way it moved that made Thomas freeze. His heart raced, and for the first time in years he felt pure, unfiltered fear. The woman seemed to sense his fear, yet she did not flinch. Instead, she spoke with a calm authority that seemed almost unnatural given the circumstances. "Do not be afraid," she said. "It follows me, yes, but it will not harm you if you trust me. You must let me in. There is no time to hesitate." Thomas wanted to question her further, to ask about the figure behind her, to demand explanations, but he felt his words catch in his throat. The presence behind her seemed alive, watching him, aware of his every thought. He realized then that hesitation could be more dangerous than trust. Slowly, he stepped aside, allowing her to enter. She moved with a quiet grace, careful not to let the shadow behind her cross the threshold. Once inside, the woman's eyes scanned the room. She looked at the simple furniture, the walls lined with books and trinkets, the small fire flickering in the hearth. "Thank you," she said softly. "It is safer here than outside, though only barely." Thomas closed the door behind her and locked it, though the action felt almost meaningless with the presence still lingering. He turned to face her, finally finding his voice. Who are you? And what is that behind you?" The woman's eyes darkened slightly, a shadow crossing her features. "I am called Naeli," she said, "and what follows me is not of this world. It is bound to my people, bound to a promise that was broken long ago. I came to seek help from someone who could face what others could not." Thomas swallowed hard. The words sounded like something out of a story, or perhaps a legend, yet the fear that gripped him was undeniably real. He had lived a life of caution, but never had he encountered anything like this. He wanted to help, to understand, yet the danger felt immediate, almost suffocating. He gestured toward a chair. "Sit. Tell me everything," he said. His voice, though steady, carried the weight of the tension in the room. Naeli moved to the chair, but even as she sat, the air around them seemed to grow colder, heavier. Thomas could feel it pressing against his chest, a weight that made each breath a conscious effort. Naeli began to speak, her voice low and melodic. She told him of her tribe, of ancient traditions and spirits that lingered long after the world had changed. She spoke of a broken promise, a spirit that had been wronged and could not find peace. And as she spoke, Thomas noticed the figure behind her again, more clearly now, a dark silhouette with shifting edges, as if it existed both in the room and somewhere beyond it at the same time. Every instinct in Thomas screamed at him to flee, yet something inside him held him rooted to the spot. The fear was real, yes, but so was the sense that he had been chosen, that somehow his life had led to this moment. He had spent years living quietly, avoiding trouble, yet here it was, knocking on his door in the dead of night, demanding courage he wasn't sure he possessed. Naeli's story unfolded slowly, revealing pieces of history, of sorrow and injustice, of events that had long been forgotten by the town, but remembered by the land. The spirit behind her moved slightly, as though reacting to her words, and Thomas realized that understanding, listening, and acknowledging the past might be the key to surviving what was coming. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. The night outside grew deeper, the moon casting pale light through the windows, while inside, the tension built like a storm about to break. Thomas felt a strange connection to Naeli, not because he knew her, but because her presence demanded something from him: trust, courage, and action. And for the first time in a long time, he felt alive, aware of the danger yet also aware of the potential to do something extraordinary. The knocking at the door, the figure behind the woman, the cold weight in the air, it all became part of a larger truth. Thomas did not fully understand it yet, but he knew that this night would change him forever. The ordinary life he had led was gone. What awaited him now was uncertain, terrifying, and fascinating all at once. And so, with the woman seated, the shadow lingering, and the fire flickering in the hearth, Thomas took a deep breath. He had stepped into the unknown, and there was no turning back. The night held its secrets tightly, but he would face them. He had no choice, and perhaps, for the first time, he realized that some doors, once opened, could never be closed again. The air in the small house felt heavier than before. Every corner seemed darker, and the shadows cast by the flickering fire twisted like living things. Thomas could not shake the feeling that the figure behind Naeli was aware of him, as though it could see his every thought, every fear. His heart pounded in his chest, and yet, despite the terror, he could not look away. There was something magnetic about the presence, something that demanded attention as if it wanted him to understand it. Naeli spoke again, her voice calm but urgent. "It follows me because of a wrong done long ago, a promise that was broken." The spirit cannot rest until the truth is faced and honored. You may not understand fully yet, but you must know this. Its power is not to harm those who seek to help, but to challenge those who ignore the past. Thomas swallowed hard, trying to make sense of her words. He had always believed in what he could see and touch, in facts and logic, but what stood behind her defied both. Its shape was shifting and unclear like smoke caught in moonlight, but there was a sense of form, of intention. He could feel it move when she spoke, as if it responded to her very breath. "What do you mean by a promise broken?" Thomas asked. His voice trembled slightly, betraying the fear he was trying to hide. Naomi looked down, her hands folded in her lap. "Long ago, when my ancestors first made peace with the settlers in this area, there was a promise of protection, a sacred word sworn to the land and to the spirits that dwell within it. But the promise was ignored, forgotten. One spirit, bound by loyalty and pain, remained trapped between worlds, unable to find peace. That is the one behind me now." Thomas nodded slowly, trying to absorb the story. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was no ordinary ghost story. This was history, memory, and the supernatural, all converging in one terrifying presence. The shadow shifted again, and this time Thomas noticed a faint outline of a figure. It was tall, with long, indistinct arms that seemed to fade into darkness. Its head moved slightly, tilting as if it were observing him, studying him. Thomas could feel a chill creeping up his spine, but he forced himself to remain seated, knowing that any sudden movement might provoke it. Naomi's eyes met his, and she spoke with a quiet determination. "You must not show fear. Spirits like this can sense hesitation and doubt. If you let fear control you, it will grow stronger. But if you remain calm, if you face it with understanding and respect, it may reveal what it wants." Thomas clenched his fists in his lap. He had faced fear before, in storms, in accidents, in life-or-death situations. But this was different. This was not a challenge of strength or skill. This was a challenge of mind and spirit. He realized that the night would demand everything he had, and perhaps even more than that. The shadow moved closer, not with a sound, but with a presence that seemed to fill the room. Thomas felt the temperature drop suddenly. His breath became visible in the pale light of the fire. He shivered, wrapping his arms around himself, yet he did not retreat. Naomi's calmness anchored him, giving him the courage to stay. "You will need to understand it to see it for what it is," Naomi continued. "It is not evil, though it may seem frightening. It is a protector, a witness to broken promises. Long ago it saved lives, guided people, and upheld the sacred laws of the land. But it was betrayed. Now it waits for recognition, for justice, for someone to listen." Thomas listened intently, his mind racing. He thought about the land around his home, the stories he had heard as a boy from traveling merchants, from old-timers who spoke of spirits and mysteries in hushed tones. He had always dismissed them as tales to frighten children, but now, faced with the undeniable presence of the shadow, he understood that there was truth behind the legends. He wanted to speak, to ask more questions, but the air felt charged, almost electric. The shadow seemed to lean forward slightly, a silent invitation or perhaps a warning. Thomas's eyes met Naomi's once more. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice steadying with resolve. "We must listen," she replied. "We must pay attention to what it shows us, to what it wants to communicate. Only then can it find peace, and only then can we understand the truth that has been hidden for so long." With that, she stood and moved closer to the shadow. Thomas followed cautiously, his senses on high alert. As they approached, he noticed subtle changes in the room. The shadows stretched and contracted, the firelight danced across the walls in strange patterns, and the air seemed to vibrate with a low hum, almost like a song without words. The shadow reached out slowly, not with hands, but with tendrils of darkness that extended and retracted. Thomas felt an inexplicable pull, as though it were trying to connect with him, to draw him into its world. Panic rose in his chest, but he took a deep breath and reminded himself of Nayeli's words. Fear was the only danger. Nayeli extended her hand toward the shadow. "We acknowledge you," she said softly. "We see the pain you carry, the loyalty you uphold, and the promises broken. We honor you." For a moment the shadow seemed to pause, as if listening. Then, slowly, it began to shift, revealing faint glimpses of a figure more human than monstrous. Thomas could make out a face, not fully formed but filled with sadness and longing. The figure's eyes met his, and he felt a wave of emotion unlike anything he had experienced before: grief, loyalty, and a deep, unspoken plea for understanding. Thomas's mind raced. He had been taught to act, to solve problems, but this required patience, empathy, and respect. He reached out a hand, cautiously, toward the space where the shadow's presence seemed most concentrated. A chill ran through him, yet there was no pain, only a strange sense of connection, as if he were touching not a body but a story, a memory, a truth that had waited years to be seen. "You can speak," Nayeli said, turning to him. "Not with words but with attention. Feel what it carries. Understand the sorrow and the loyalty. Only then will the way forward appear." Thomas focused, shutting out the fear, the cold, and the doubt. He imagined the spirit's past, its actions, its devotion to the land and to those it had protected. Slowly he felt understanding grow inside him, like a seed taking root in the darkness. The shadow responded, moving slightly closer, its form solidifying into something more tangible, more real. Hours seemed to pass in silence, punctuated by the occasional movement of the shadow and the soft, rhythmic voice of Nayeli guiding him. Thomas felt a strange bond forming, not of friendship, but of mutual recognition. The spirit was ancient, powerful, and sorrowful, yet it seemed willing to reveal itself to someone who would listen without judgment. Finally, the shadow began to recede slightly, and Thomas realized that the first step had been taken. The presence was still there, still powerful, but it no longer felt threatening. Instead, it seemed expectant, as though waiting for the next act, the next acknowledgement, the next moment of understanding. Nayeli turned to Thomas, her eyes soft but serious. "You have done well," she said. "The spirit recognizes your courage and your willingness to face what is unknown, but this is only the beginning. The night is not over, and the truth it carries is still hidden. We must follow it step by step, if we are to uncover the full story and bring peace to what has been lost." Thomas nodded, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. The terror had not vanished entirely, but it had transformed into something else, a call to action, a challenge that demanded not strength but awareness and understanding. The shadow lingered, but now it felt like a guide rather than a threat, leading him deeper into a story that stretched across generations, across promises made and broken, across the thin line between the living and the unseen. As the night continued, Thomas realized that his life, once ordinary and predictable, had been irrevocably changed. The encounter with Nayeli and the shadow had opened a door to a world he had never known, a world filled with danger, mystery, and the power of truths long hidden. He understood that the hours ahead would test him in ways he could not yet imagine, and that the courage he had found in the face of fear would be needed again and again. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the sounds of the night, rustling leaves, distant calls, the faint echo of something unseen. Inside, Thomas and Nayeli prepared themselves, each aware of the presence that lingered, each feeling the weight of the history that pressed against them. And though the darkness still filled the room, there was now a sense of purpose, a path forward, however uncertain it might be. The spirit watched, silent but aware. And Thomas knew, with a clarity that both frightened and inspired him, that he had taken the first step into a story that would change him forever. The first light of dawn had not yet arrived, and the small house remained shrouded in shadows. Thomas felt the weight of the night pressing down on him, but he also felt a strange sense of purpose growing inside him. The presence behind Naeli had shifted from threatening to watchful, and he sensed that it wanted to communicate more, to share its story with someone who would truly see it. Naeli had told him to listen, to pay attention, and now he understood that listening meant more than hearing words. It meant observing, feeling, and opening his mind to things he had never considered real. Naeli rose from her chair and walked slowly toward the window, looking out at the forest that surrounded the house. "The spirit has chosen to reveal part of its memory," she said softly. "It is tied to a place near here, a part of the land that has been forgotten by most. The past lives in the shadows of the present, Thomas. That is what you must see." Thomas nodded. He felt a mix of excitement and fear. The shadow moved slightly behind Naeli, almost as if it were nodding in agreement. He realized then that this was not a simple haunting. The spirit had a purpose. It wanted him to understand something, to uncover a truth that had been buried for decades. "Show me," Thomas said quietly. "Show me what I need to know." Naeli turned to him, her eyes calm but intense. "You must follow carefully. You may see things that are hard to understand, moments from the past that carry pain and sorrow. Do not look away. You must face them if you are to help." The shadows seemed to shift, and suddenly the room felt colder, denser, as if time itself had slowed. Thomas could feel a pressure on his chest, but it was not painful, more like the weight of history settling on him. The room darkened further, and faint shapes began to appear in the corners of his vision. Images from another time, another life, flickered briefly, faces, landscapes, moments frozen in memory. Thomas blinked and saw a small clearing in the forest near his home. He felt himself drawn into it, not physically, but mentally, as though his consciousness was moving through the veil of time. In the clearing stood people dressed in clothing from long ago. Among them were members of Naeli's tribe, performing a ritual that seemed both solemn and urgent. He watched silently, sensing the importance of every gesture, every word spoken in a language he did not understand but felt in his chest. Then he saw it, a betrayal. A figure from outside, the tribe had broken a promise, one that had been sworn to protect the land, its people, and the spirits that dwelled there. Thomas could see the pain in the eyes of those who had been wronged, the anger and sorrow that lingered in the air even after all these years. The spirit behind Naeli had witnessed this betrayal firsthand, and it had carried the memory ever since, unable to find peace. Thomas felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He had never experienced anything like this. It was not just fear he felt now. It was empathy, understanding, and a deep connection to something much larger than himself. The shadow shifted, and he could feel it guiding him, helping him to see the truth that had been hidden for so long. Naeli spoke softly, her voice barely louder than a whisper. "Do you understand now why it cannot rest? Do you see the weight it carries, the pain it has held for decades?" Thomas nodded. "I see it, I feel it, and I want to help." The shadow moved closer, and for the first time Thomas noticed a faint glow within it, like the heart of the memory itself. He realized that the spirit was not seeking revenge. It sought recognition, acknowledgement, and someone willing to honor the promise that had been broken. It wanted the past to be seen, to be respected, so that the wrong could be corrected, even in the present. "Then we must act carefully," Naeli said. "The spirit can guide us, but we must follow its path. The land remembers, and the people remember, even if they do not speak of it. There are places near here that hold the story, and you must go there with me. Are you ready?" Thomas took a deep breath, steadying himself. He felt the weight of responsibility, but he also felt courage rising within him. "I'm ready," he said. Together they left the small house, stepping into the cold night. The forest outside seemed alive with whispers, the trees swaying gently despite the stillness of the air. Thomas could feel the shadow close behind them, moving silently yet deliberately, guiding their path. Each step he took was deliberate, careful, but he could not ignore the growing sense that he was walking through history itself. As they approached the clearing he had seen in the vision, Thomas noticed subtle signs of the past in the present. The remnants of old stone markers, faint carvings in the trees, and patches of land that seemed untouched by time. Naeli explained that these places were sacred, holding the memories of those who had lived and the spirits that had watched over them. The spirit lingered here, close to what had been broken, waiting for recognition and respect. They stopped at a small stone circle, worn by time but still intact. Naeli knelt and traced the carvings with her fingers, speaking softly in her language. Thomas watched, fascinated as the shadow moved around the circle, settling over certain symbols, almost as if it were blessing them, acknowledging them, or marking them as important. He felt a strange warmth amidst the cold, a sense that they were closer to understanding the spirit's story. Naeli turned to him, her expression serious. These symbols tell part of the story. They speak of promises, of loyalty, and of the balance between people and the land. The spirit is bound to this place because the balance was broken. We must honor it or it will never rest. Thomas knelt beside her, touching the cold stones. He felt a connection, not just to the spirit but to the history, to the land, and to the people who had lived and fought and loved there. The shadow moved closer, circling them both, and for a moment Thomas thought he saw the faintest outline of a human form within it. A face, perhaps, or a figure that reflected the memory of those who had been wronged. Suddenly, the air shifted. A wind rose from nowhere, rustling leaves and carrying the faint scent of smoke and earth. The shadow stretched taller, and Thomas felt a chill, but also a sense of clarity. The spirit was showing him the consequences of the broken promise, the imbalance, the sorrow, and the weight that had lingered for generations. Naeli spoke again. Now you understand. The spirit does not seek to harm us but to be seen and heard. Its story must be acknowledged. Only then can the past and present come together, and only then can it find peace. Thomas nodded, feeling a deep determination. He realized that helping this spirit would not be easy. It would require courage, understanding, and respect for something far beyond his ordinary life. But he also felt a sense of purpose, a sense that this night, this encounter, was meant to change him, to teach him something that could not be learned in ordinary ways. He rose to his feet and looked at the shadow. It did not move aggressively, but it seemed to recognize him, almost as if it could feel his intention. He spoke quietly, though not expecting a reply. I will help you. I will honor what was broken and do what I can to bring balance. The shadow shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly, and Thomas felt a strange warmth in his chest. Naeli placed a hand on his shoulder. That is all it asks, she said softly. The rest will follow if we are careful and respectful. But be ready. The night is not over, and the path ahead will test us in ways we cannot yet imagine. As they remained in the clearing, Thomas looked around at the quiet forest, the stones, the whispers of the past carried on the wind. He understood now that the night, the shadow, and Naeli had brought him to a place of knowledge and responsibility. The spirit was no longer just a presence behind the woman. It was a guide, a teacher, and a reminder that the world was filled with mysteries waiting for those willing to see and understand. And in that moment, Thomas knew that he could not turn back. The path forward would be difficult, filled with fear and uncertainty, but also with revelation and connection. The shadow watched silently, and Thomas felt a quiet promise within him, that he would face whatever came next, that he would honor the past, and that he would help bring peace to a spirit who had waited far too long to be heard. The forest was darker now, though the moonlight filtered through the tall trees, casting long, twisting shadows on the ground. Thomas felt his heart racing, not from fear alone, but from anticipation. He and Naeli had followed the spirit's guidance deeper into the woods, to a place where the air felt charged, alive with energy from the past. Every rustle of leaves, every distant owl call, seemed louder than usual, carrying meaning he could almost understand. The shadow moved silently behind them, its presence both unsettling and strangely protective. Naeli paused, crouching near a stone outcropping partially covered with moss and roots. "This is it," she whispered. "Here lies the heart of the memory, the place where the promise was broken. We must be careful, Thomas. The spirit will not act against us if we respect it, but it will test our courage and our intention." Thomas nodded, feeling the weight of her words. The forest around them was silent now, as if holding its breath. The shadows stretched, forming shapes he could barely recognize, arms reaching toward the ground, faces flickering within the darkness, images of the past overlapping with the present. He swallowed hard, knowing that this was the moment he had been preparing for, even if he had not known it until now. Naeli knelt and traced symbols into the dirt, chanting softly in her language. The words carried a rhythm that seemed to echo through the trees, and Thomas felt the air thrum around him, alive with the unseen presence. The shadows shifted closer, circling them, and for the first time it seemed to Thomas that it wanted something more than attention. It wanted action. It wanted the truth recognized. Suddenly, images appeared in the air before them, faint but clear. Thomas saw the betrayal that had caused the spirit's unrest. A figure from the settlers long ago had broken a solemn vow to the tribe, taking land and ignoring sacred agreements. Faces of those wronged appeared, filled with pain and sorrow. Thomas could feel their suffering as though it were his own, a weight pressing on his chest that made breathing difficult. "This is what we must face," Naeli said, her voice steady. "We cannot hide. We must acknowledge the pain and show that we understand. Only then will the spirit reveal the next step." Thomas took a deep breath and stepped forward. He spoke softly, not knowing if the spirit could hear words, but hoping it could feel the meaning behind them. "We see what was done. We know the wrong that has been carried for generations. We are here to honor it, to acknowledge it, and to help bring peace." The shadow shifted violently, stretching taller, darker, more imposing. Thomas felt fear surge through him, but he held his ground. Naeli reached for his hand, a quiet reminder that he was not alone. Together, they focused on the spirit, not as an enemy but as a guide, a being trapped by history and memory, waiting for recognition. Then, the spirit revealed itself more fully. It took a form both human and otherworldly. Its face was sorrowful, its eyes filled with the memory of countless years of loyalty and pain. Thomas could see why Naeli had said it was not evil. The spirit's intent was not harm, it was justice, recognition, and the hope of closure. Naeli spoke again, her voice firm. "Spirit, we honor you. We see your loyalty, your service, your sacrifice. We acknowledge the broken promise and the pain that has endured. You are not forgotten." The shadow moved closer, and Thomas felt a presence wrap around him, not threatening but guiding. He felt a sudden understanding of the events that had occurred so long ago, the intentions, the betrayals, the loyalty, and the sorrow. Every emotion the spirit carried was laid bare before him, yet he did not flinch. Instead, he welcomed the connection, knowing that only by embracing it could they help the spirit find peace. The air grew colder, and the wind whispered through the trees like voices of the past. Naeli continued her chant, her hands moving with precise gestures over the stones and dirt. Thomas watched, noticing that every motion seemed to direct the spirit's energy, calming it, guiding it, channeling it into recognition rather than unrest. The shadow's movements became less erratic, more focused, as if it understood that Thomas and Naeli were allies, not intruders. Suddenly, a vision appeared, sharper than before. Thomas saw the moment the promise had been broken. The betrayal was clear. The figure from the settlers had taken what was sacred without regard for the people or the land. The spirit had intervened then, trying to protect what it could, but it had been overpowered and left bound to the memory of injustice. Thomas felt a surge of empathy, not for the betrayal itself, but for the endless patience, loyalty, and devotion of the spirit that had endured through the centuries. "We must correct it," Thomas said softly, almost to himself. "We must honor what was lost." Naeli nodded. "Yes. We cannot change the past, but we can acknowledge it, respect it, and restore balance. That is what the spirit needs." They moved closer to the center of the stone circle, where the carvings were most worn but still visible. Naeli's chant grew louder, the rhythm more deliberate, resonating with the spirit's presence. Thomas joined in, speaking words he did not fully understand but felt deeply in his chest. The shadow shifted with them, almost dancing in the pale moonlight, its movements less chaotic, more purposeful. The spirit's energy began to gather, forming a shape that was clearer than before. Its sorrow was evident, but so was a sense of hope, a recognition that someone finally saw it, acknowledged it, and respected the story it carried. Thomas felt a warmth in his chest, a sensation of connection not just to the spirit, but to the land, the history, and the generations who had lived and suffered there. Then a sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, carrying leaves, dust, and the faint scent of earth and smoke. The spirit shifted dramatically, its form towering and ethereal, but Thomas no longer felt fear. He felt understanding, courage, and a determination to see the night through. Naeli's hand was steady on his shoulder, a reminder that they were not alone, that the task required both respect and partnership. Slowly the spirit lowered itself, its form settling into a calm, almost human shape. Thomas could see its face clearly now, and he felt the depth of emotion it carried: loyalty, grief, patience, and finally relief. Naeli knelt and spoke softly. "It is time to let the past rest. We honor you, you may now find peace." The shadow seemed to breathe, a sound like the wind through the trees, and then it began to fade. Its form grew lighter, almost like mist, and Thomas felt a sense of release, a lightness that had not been in the clearing before. The spirit lingered only for a moment, as if giving one last look to Thomas and Naeli before disappearing entirely. Thomas felt a mixture of awe and relief. The terror that had gripped him hours ago was gone, replaced by an understanding of something far greater than himself. He realized that the spirit's presence had been a test, not of strength, but of courage, empathy, and respect. By facing fear and acknowledging history, he had helped bring balance to something that had endured for generations. Naeli stood, her expression serene. "It is done," she said softly. "The spirit has found peace. The land remembers, the history is acknowledged, and the balance is restored. But remember, Thomas, this is not the end. There are lessons to carry forward, truths to honor, and the understanding that some things, once revealed, can never be forgotten." Thomas nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He looked around the clearing, at the stones, the trees, and the quiet forest, and he understood that the night had changed him profoundly. He had faced fear, witnessed history, and helped a spirit find peace. The memory of the shadow, of its sorrow and loyalty, would remain with him always, a reminder of the connection between past and present, between the living and the unseen. As they walked back toward the small house, Thomas felt a calmness he had never known before. The forest seemed alive, but gentle, the wind carrying whispers that were no longer frightening but comforting. Naeli walked beside him, her presence steady, and the memory of the spirit lingered not as a shadow of fear, but as a story of courage, respect, and understanding. That night, Thomas learned that the world held mysteries beyond comprehension, that history lived not only in books, but in the land, the people, and even in spirits bound by memory. He had been tested, confronted with the unknown, and had emerged changed, not just by what he had seen, but by how he had chosen to face it. And though the shadow was gone, its story had become part of him, a reminder that some lessons, some truths, and some histories must be acknowledged to bring balance to the world. The forest had returned to its natural calm. The wind moved gently through the trees, and the first rays of dawn began to touch the horizon, casting a soft golden light over the clearing. Thomas stood quietly, looking at the place where the spirit had faded into the air. For a long moment he simply breathed, feeling the stillness, the peace, and the weight of what had just happened. He realized that the night had changed him in ways he could not yet fully understand. Naomi stood beside him, her presence steady and reassuring. "It is done," she said again, though this time her words felt different, lighter, more like a shared acknowledgement than a command. "The spirit has found rest. Its story has been seen and honored. The land is at peace, at least for now." Thomas nodded, though he did not speak. He felt a deep sense of connection, not just to the spirit, but to Naomi, to the land, and to the long, intertwined history that had led them to this moment. The past, he realized, was not something that could be ignored or forgotten. It lived on in the memories of people, in the whispers of the land, and even in spirits bound by loyalty and sorrow. They began to walk back to the small house. The forest seemed softer now, more alive but no longer threatening. The shadows that had once twisted and reached toward them now simply followed in quiet harmony, as if acknowledging that the balance had been restored. Thomas felt a strange warmth in his chest, a sense of purpose that had not existed before. He understood that courage was not only facing what frightened him, but also accepting responsibility for the unseen and the forgotten. As they reached the edge of the clearing, Naomi paused and turned to Thomas. "The spirit has left a mark," she said. "Not a physical mark, but a memory, a presence that will guide you. You may not always see it, but you will feel it when you are needed, when the past calls for recognition. That is the gift of this night." Thomas looked at her, trying to understand fully. "A guide." "You mean it will stay with me?" he asked. Naomi smiled faintly. "Yes, in a way. The spirit's rest does not mean it disappears entirely. Its lesson and its memory remain, and you carry them now. The courage, the respect, and the understanding you showed are part of the gift it leaves for those who walk this land." Thomas felt the weight of her words. He had faced fear in ways he never thought possible, had witnessed history in ways that were both terrifying and beautiful, and had helped a spirit finally find peace. The experience had changed him, not only in understanding the past, but in recognizing the responsibility that came with knowledge and awareness. As they walked the path back to the house, Thomas thought about the life he had lived before this night. It had been quiet, predictable, and safe, but it had lacked this kind of meaning, this connection to something larger than himself. He realized that true courage was not just about survival, but about engagement with the world, with its mysteries, and with its forgotten truths. When they reached the small house, Naomi stopped at the door and turned to him once more. "You have done well," she said softly. "Remember what you have learned tonight. Honor the past, respect the present, and guide those who come after. The world is full of unseen stories, and some of them call for recognition, for courage, and for understanding. You have shown that you are ready to face them." Thomas nodded, a sense of calm washing over him. He felt gratitude, not only to Naomi but to the spirit, to the land, and to the lessons he had been shown. He realized that the night had been more than a test. It had been an awakening, a reminder that the world was far larger, more mysterious, and more interconnected than he had ever imagined. Naomi stepped inside the house briefly, her movements quiet and purposeful. She returned with a small token, a simple object carved with symbols that seemed ancient yet familiar. "This is for you," she said, "a reminder of what has passed and of what will continue. Keep it close, and it will help guide you when you need courage or understanding." Thomas took the token carefully, feeling its weight in his hand. It was small, but it carried significance far beyond its size. It was a symbol of connection, of responsibility, and of the night that had forever changed him. He felt a quiet promise within himself to honor it, to remember it, and to carry its meaning forward in the days, months, and years to come. The morning grew brighter, and with it, a sense of renewal. The forest seemed more vibrant, the air fresher, and even the shadows felt lighter, less menacing. Thomas understood that the spirit's peace had restored more than its own rest. It had also brought balance to the land, to the history, and to those who lived nearby. The lessons of loyalty, courage, and respect were now part of him, as alive as the trees and the soil beneath his feet. For the next few hours, Thomas sat quietly by the fire, reflecting on the events of the night. The fear he had felt earlier now seemed like a distant memory, replaced by understanding, gratitude, and a sense of purpose. He thought about the spirit, about Naeli, and about the countless untold stories that waited quietly in the world, seeking recognition and understanding. He realized that life would never be the same. The ordinary existence he had known was gone, replaced by awareness, empathy, and responsibility. He had glimpsed the extraordinary, faced it, and survived, not through force, but through courage, respect, and understanding. And in doing so, he had become part of something larger than himself, a thread in the ongoing story of the land, its people, and the spirits that lingered in memory and history. Naeli prepared to leave as the sun rose higher, her presence as calm and purposeful as ever. "Remember, Thomas," she said, "the spirit has found peace, but the lessons remain. Honor the past, respect the present, and guide the future when it calls. You have been given a gift, a connection to what has been lost, and a responsibility to ensure it is remembered." Thomas nodded, feeling the weight of her words and the truth in them. He knew that he would carry this night with him always, a reminder that courage was not only facing fear, but also acknowledging the unseen, the forgotten, and the sacred. He thanked Naeli for her guidance and watched as she disappeared into the forest, her figure blending with the trees, quiet and purposeful as a shadow in the dawn. Alone once more, Thomas walked slowly back to his house, feeling the first warmth of the sun on his face. The forest around him seemed alive with subtle movement, the rustle of leaves, the distant song of birds, and the quiet whisper of the wind through the trees. He realized that the night's events had opened his eyes to a world he had never truly seen, a world full of stories, spirits, and histories waiting for someone willing to notice, understand, and honor them. Sitting back in his chair, Thomas placed the token from Naeli on the table beside him. He looked at it for a long time, feeling the connection it represented. It was more than a symbol. It was a reminder of courage, respect, and the bond between past and present. He knew that, though the spirit had found peace, the lessons it carried would remain with him forever, guiding his actions and his understanding of the world. As the day progressed, Thomas stepped outside, looking out at the land around his home. The forest, the clearing, and even the small stones where the spirit had rested all seemed imbued with a quiet energy, a balance restored by acknowledgement and courage. He felt a deep gratitude for having been part of something so profound, something that transcended fear and touched the heart of history itself. He understood that the night had been a turning point, a moment that would define him for the rest of his life. The spirit's story, Naeli's guidance, and the courage he had found within himself were all pieces of a larger truth. That respect for the past, empathy for the present, and responsibility for the future were the keys to understanding the world in its truest form. Thomas felt a quiet strength rising within him. The shadow that had once frozen him to the spot was gone, but its memory remained, not as a threat, but as a guide, a teacher, and a reminder that some stories must be honored to keep balance in the world. And with that knowledge, he knew he could face whatever challenges might come, carrying with him the lessons of the night, the wisdom of the spirit, and the enduring presence of courage, respect, and understanding. The sun climbed higher, bathing the land in light, and Thomas smiled quietly to himself. The night's ordeal had ended, but its lessons would remain, a part of him forever. And though the spirit was gone, he could feel it in every rustle of leaves, every whisper of the wind, and every shadow that danced in the sunlight. The world had many secrets, many stories and many spirits, but he had learned to see, to understand, and to honor them. And in that understanding, Thomas found peace, knowing that the night's events had not only changed him, but had also restored a balance that had long been lost, a balance that would continue, quietly and profoundly, in the land, the history, and the hearts of those willing to see and respect it.